Okay. Good afternoon and welcome. I am Allison Sutton, the Program Manager with the Black Metropolis Research Consortium. For those of you who may be with us today and not familiar with the Black Metropolis Research Consortium, we are a Chicago-based membership association for libraries, universities, museums, community arts organizations, and other kinds of archival institutions. The BMRC mission is to connect all who seek to document, share, understand, and preserve Black experiences. So in my role with the consortium, I oversee our two primary educational initiatives. So one of them is the Summer Short-Term Fellowship. It's a program that has attracted scholars, writers, artists from all over the country and other parts of the world. So since 2009, when we first started this program, we have hosted more than 100 fellows each summer for a 1-month residency here in Chicago. So each of them, after their time sort of digging through the archives at various BMRC repositories, after their time here, it's customary that they share their work in a presentation. So today, we will hear from one of 7 2022 fellows, Paul Michael Thompson. Paul Michael is an interdisciplinary scholar, theater artist, and co-founder of the Story Theater from the Story Theater here in Chicago. So Paul Michael is pursuing his PhD from the W.E.B. Du Bois Department of Afro-American Studies at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. He centers his research on the new play development praxis of the Black arts movement, Black feminist drama and dramatists, modalities of decentralizing power in artistic institutions, and the intersection between creativity and Black liberation. Buttressed by experience in professional theater landscape, Paul Michael seeks to integrate and dismantle white supremacy and anti-Black racism through and within artistic practice. He graduated summa cum laude from the Honors College at the University of Arizona, earning a BFA in acting, a BA in Africana Studies, and minors in both Spanish and art history. And he was named the Outstanding Senior for the College of Fine Arts. Paul Michael is deeply grateful for the opportunity to work with the Black Metropolis Research Consortium, and we are delighted to have him with us. To engage further, this summer has been an opportunity for him to engage further with his work, and he asked that if you wish to know more and reach out to him, you can do so through Paul Michael Thompson. That's Thompson without a P. That's paulmichaelthompson.com. All right, so I am going to stop sharing my screen to allow him to share his and to get started.
All right, let's do it. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Allison. I appreciate that introduction. Very kind. This has been the most amazing summer working with the BMRC, and I'm excited to share a little bit about what I found. So one thing that I learned, well, 2 things. First off, one, you'll notice this title is different than the title that you were sent. You're not in the wrong place. I think this change in title reflects the changing nature of this project, and that this is a work in process. As Allison said, a lot of my research is interested in creative process, and also, you know, I'm not only engaging that with scholastically, I'm also engaging that experientially. And so as I was putting this project together, I thought, yeah, that initial title actually doesn't fit with what I ended up finding. So we got a title change. Secondly, I learned through my research that the Kuumba Theater, started by Val Gray Ward, before and after every show, they would start and end with a ritual of uplifting gratitude. And I wanted to take that practice into today's presentation. So I just wanted to start by saying thank you for being here. Thank you to the BMRC for this opportunity. And here we go. So Allison said a little bit about my background. I think it is helpful to always contextualize where the researcher is coming from because, of course, our experiences do influence the research that we're interested in and that we're able to perform. I won't rehash the things from my bio that she shared, but I think that something to understand is that I am coming to this work with the experience of having worked as a professional in the Chicago theater landscape. And so that is informing a lot of the questions that I'm asking with the research, and also the conclusions that I'm able to draw. I am currently at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I see some of my friends and cohort members here today. Thank y'all for being here. The Du Bois Department at the University of Massachusetts Amherst has a long tradition of the scholar activist, but also the scholar artist. And that is somewhere that I have felt very celebrated for the intersection of both my artistry and scholarship, and very grateful to be learning under the folks there that I am. And then a little bit more for gratitude. Just want to say again, thank you to the BMRC for this opportunity. This is, for full transparency, this is my first research fellowship and everyone has to have their first. And I feel so honored that the BMRC took a chance on me for this, and that they were compelled by my research project and interested in it. And then, buttressed me and supported me throughout the entire it was really supposed to be 4 weeks, but we did about 3 months, because I love Chicago and I was happy to be here and wanted to make the most of this experience. I was also supported by the archivists and librarians of all the research collections and repositories that I visited. I think that unfortunately, COVID has been a really hard time for archives and for libraries. There are understaffing issues, there are limited hours, and so I really want to uplift those folks, because all of them were so prompt in responding to emails, would get coffee with me and tell me, oh, you got to look at this collection, and oh, you need to talk to this person and let me connect you with so-and-so. So my research benefited greatly from their expertise, and I want to make sure to uplift them. And then I want to uplift the Black arts movement scholars who have really laid the groundwork for the work that I was able to do this summer, with Dr. Tabiti Lewis and Dr. James Smethurst, both of whom are here today, being two of them. So thank you for the work that you all do, because it has enabled me to do the work that I did. Okay, I've split this up into 3 different parts, which is what I thought, what I found, and what happens next. So we're going to start, back in May, before I got into even one archive, with what I thought I was going to do. And then we'll see what ends up happening. So I am really interested in, as Allison said, new play development practices of the Black arts movement. I find that that is something that, because it is about creative process and not about the product of what was created, it can often get left out or overlooked in the research. And I wanted to see, is that something that can be created through or recreated through the archive? Is that something that can be knowable through the archive? I was interested in looking at a number of theaters that started during the 60s and 70s in Chicago, including Black-led institutions, multicultural institutions, and predominantly white institutions, and seeing how they were engaging with the Black dramatists that they were programming. What support were they offering? What stake in the company were they offering? And how were they facilitating the creative process for these playwrights? One thing that I think is amazing about the collection that the BMRC has access to is that there are so many theaters that were started at this time. And of course, this is during the cultural and political energies of the Black arts movement nationally, but especially in New York, and also the civil rights and Black power movements throughout the United States. And so it was really exciting to me that we had access to these theaters that were founded at this time. I think this project is important now. If you've been following anything about Chicago theater, Chris Jones, who's our kind of big theater critic in Chicago, he writes for the Tribune. He recently came out with an op-ed that was saying that, Chicago is having a leadership crisis. And in 2020, there were articles and groups like the Second Act Chicago and We See You White American Theater that came out talking about the anti-Blackness in the Chicago theater community, and what are theatrical institutions going to do to change that and to rectify that. And there has been, I would say, a noticeable effort to do that, especially to bring more Black playwrights and playwrights of color in general into new play development practices in Chicago institutions. My question is, how are we supporting those folks once we have brought them in? Because it is not enough to, bring someone into the fold if you are not supporting them in any way once they are there. And so I wanted to, instead of think we have to create new forms and new ideas about how to do this, I wanted to look back at a time during the Black Arts Movement where this had been done successfully, and that we had seen a real fecundity of Black creativity in this city, especially in the theater. And then finally, in the reading that I have done of the Black Arts Movement, I find that a lot of it can be very New York centric. And I find that there is, of course, lovingly an emphasis on the many different media of art, the many different, poetry and the visual arts. And theater, because of its ephemeral nature, can sometimes get overlooked, especially the creative process of it. So I was interested in focusing on that. Okay, so that was everything I was bringing in. And then I come in, like I said, it's my first research fellowship, first time in the archive. I'm like, all right, show me the new play development stuff. And I get in, and there I realize, wow, I've picked a big project. I'm looking at a lot of different theaters over a fairly long amount of time. And that's a lot of papers to sort through. Some of these, I'll get to this later, some of these have, upwards of 50 linear feet, over 30 boxes in their collection. So the highlighted ones here, the bolded ones on the left, are the ones that I was able to get to in the short time that I have been here, and was still able to find so much richness from those collections, and excited to get back into the others once I returned to Chicago. I found too that I was able to supplement gaps in the archives with oral histories. And so I talked with folks like Angela Jackson, whose papers I had been in at Northwestern University. I met Ms. Porter, who had worked with ETA for 30 plus years at a random theater event in Chicago. That was like such a godsend. And then Soyini Madison, who had worked with Kuumba and used to teach at Northwestern and now lives in Skokie, was a great resource to me as well. Then there are still the great thing about theater people, one, and I think people who were a part of the Black Arts Movement who want this history to be told and who want this history to be known. They're so good about connecting you with other people. So there are all these other folks who, I have a number or I have an email address who I hope to eventually do oral history and interviews with as well, because I find that it does really help recreate that artistic space in a way that the archive has a bit harder time doing. I want to be transparent about obstacles that I faced and challenges that I faced, because I feel like in academia, we talk a lot about the wins, and we go to these talks and we talk about like, and I'm so smart and I did this and this and this. And I think it's important to temper that with the reality of working in a short period of time in the archives. And so there were a couple of roadblocks that I faced. restricted collections. So two collections that were very important in my initial pitch of this project were the Valgray Ward papers, who of course started Kumba Theater, and ETA Creative Arts Foundation, which is a Black-led theater that was started in the 1960s that is still around in Chicago today. And had a lot of focus on new play development and working with and training Black playwrights. And unfortunately, both of those, I found out when I got here that I would not be able to look in either of those collections. And that was hard. I think also when I was at the Harold Washington Library, rightfully so, they have a very strict policy when it comes to copyright. And they are really trying to protect themselves and their scholars. And I think that's wonderful. Unfortunately, they would not allow me to take scans of scripts, which, trying to learn how a script is changing from one draft to the next, that's really hard to do if you're not able to copy down the script, right? If you're not able to provide a record of the script. So that threw a little bit of a wrench in what I had initially hoped to be the plan. As I mentioned, our visiting hours have been limited since COVID. And so at the Harold Washington Library, for instance, where the majority of my collections were, they only have 2 days that you are able to go and be in special collections. And each day you're only allowed to be there for 4 hours. So there was this scarcity of time in a sense, right? And coupled with my own naivete, which is that I think I picked a really big topic that is, I think, still a really good topic, and one that I've definitely now laid a groundwork for, but may not be able to be accomplished in the BMRC's 4-week summer short-term fellowship, right? Emphasis on short-term. So I've written down here, no longer an article, not yet a dissertation, because I went into this thinking maybe this will be an article that I'm able to write after this research. And once I got into the archives, I was like, oh, this is going to be a lot more than just an article. Some exciting things that I did find. Okay, so those are the obstacles, right? Those are some of the challenges and what I thought I was going to do. Let's talk about what I actually did find. One thing that was really exciting to me was that across the board, we saw experimental forms of theater, right? There were, of course, kitchen sink dramas, the well-made play, but there were also new ideas about what theater could do and how theater could be interdisciplinary in its artistic work. And so you see across the board in Kumba Theater and Black Ensemble Theater, in Free Street Theater, that at ETA, that a lot of the first shows that these folks are doing in their seasons are actually using writing from other mediums. So using the poetry of Gwendolyn Brooks as a theatrical event in Kumba's, I think, 2nd season, right? You can see here on the right, Black Ensemble Theater, it's they're doing poetry and music, and that this is one of their theatrical events. And do we consider these plays? And how, if we do or do not, how does that align with this idea of new play development? So that was something that I was excited about. I think something I also saw, and we'll go into this more later, is that the community of the theater practitioners in Chicago during the Black Arts Movement was truly a community, and that they were not, that folks were really integrated between companies. You didn't have someone who only works at Black Ensemble Theater, right? There is an integration between the many Black-led companies that came up during this time. And for their part as well, folks also working in the multicultural institutions and the predominantly white institutions too. You know, as I said, because a lot of the current scholarship on, well, first of all, I want to say, I think it's amazing that the Black arts movement has seen this resurgence in scholarship in the last 10 years, right? There is really a lot out there and a lot more being written every day, which is really exciting. And again, I want to uplift the scholars who have done the groundwork for that to be able to happen. I would say even in that scholarship, though, there were still Chicago theaters that I found in my research in the archives, once I started letting the archive kind of tell me where it wanted to go, that I had never heard of before. So on the left here, this is from the Black Theater Alliance of Chicago's meeting minutes. And this is who was present that day. And so I was like, oh, perfect. This is like just a list of who was represented in that Black Theater Alliance of Chicago. On the right, you can see some of those names pop up as well, though this was a Kumba event or was in the Kumba Theater Collection papers. You can see that there are theaters here on the right that do not have their own collections at the Harold Washington Library, right? Lamont Zeno or aspiring artists do not have their own collections currently at the Harold Washington or with the Black Metropolis Research Consortium. And yet I was able to learn about their existence and hopefully go down some paths to find out more about them because of the collections that are there. This was a really exciting thing to find out as well. Black-led theaters, more so from my research, than the predominantly white institutions and the multicultural institutions that were founded in the 60s and 70s were really committed to training the next generation of Black theater practitioners, right? And this could be for so many reasons. I think one, just knowing what I know about the theater training practices of undergraduate institutions in the US during the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of racism, unsurprisingly, in those institutions. And a lot of Black theater artists were not given the tools because they were not given access to these training programs. And so I thought it was really exciting to see theaters like Black Ensemble, to see theaters like Kumba and ETA making it part of their mission to train that next generation, right? So as you can see from Black Ensemble here on the left, they say we have the professional theater company that works with people who are already ready, disciplined and experienced in their art. And then the workshop company is to equip artists with the tools necessary to compete in the job market. This is really exciting to me. And also, I'm curious as to how that can inform the theatrical work of Chicago in the 21st century. There are a lot of educational programmings, but a lot of those are focused in the kind of K through 12 world and bringing theater to kids in their elementary school or in their high school. And that's awesome. But I am curious about what does a workshop company look like in 2022 as Black Ensemble had conceived of it in the 70s. Okay, when I was talking about the theater community being a true community, especially for those who were in charge of and working with the Black-led theaters in the Black arts movement time in Chicago, this is a perfect example to me. So we have J. Willard Stewart here, who was a playwright and a director and involved with the multiple theaters. Again, one of those people who was integrated across multiple theatrical institutions in Chicago and unfortunately left us in '96. And so this is from his funeral program that Angela Jackson had saved in her papers. And you can see, if you look, I mean, you can just look anywhere on here and you will see names pop up from the Chicago theater community, right? We see folks like Charles Michael Moore. We see Jackie Taylor, the founder of the Black Ensemble Theater, Val Gray Ward. And so Abena Joan Brown of ETA. We see these folks at taking a leading role in this man's celebration of life. That felt significant to me because certainly as someone who has worked in the theater in Chicago, I'm like, probably me too. Like at my funeral, it'll probably be like all my theater friends, you know, putting the show on of my funeral. And I think that to see so viscerally the way that this community showed up for this man in death as well as in life, I don't know, that moved me. I was very, very interested in this. This was a good find for me. I want to talk about reverberations, because another thing about these, for a lot of these theaters having been long-lasting companies like Black Ensemble that is still operating, like Free Street that is still operating, like ETA that is still operating, the collections exist far outside of the periodization that has been given to the Black arts movement, right? So we usually conceive of the Black arts movement as 1965 to 1975, roughly. I would say that in Chicago, I'm really curious about that periodization and if that feels accurate still. But the archives, the collections of these theaters have a lot longer than that 10-year span. And so you see things like the Playwrights Discovery Initiative at ETA that happens in the 80s and 90s. And I would connect this intimately to the Playwrights Speak and reader theater that ETA put up in the 60s and 70s. So we're seeing the reverberations of the investment in the new canon, the investment in the new plays by Black dramatists. And then I started thinking, you know, based on what I found, can this be recreated today? Because again, of course, that is the reason that, one of the reasons that I went into this in the first place, is to see what lessons can we learn. I think something that was shocking to me was how much money was given by the government, state and federal, in a way that, as someone who has a 501c3 theater company and has applied for a lot of grants, is not my experience as happening today. So for instance, Free Street Theater in its first year of existence got $200,000 from the Illinois Arts Council to just start. Having not done anything, was able to get $200,000 right off the gate. And that would be very surprising to me if that were to happen in today's world, with the cuts that we saw to arts funding that happened, of course, in the 80s, and then again in the 2020s. We also see that Black creators and dramatists had a place they had stake in the company. They had a place on the board of directors. A lot of these companies that were founded, like ETA with Abena Joan Brown, Kumba with Val Gray Ward, and Black Ensemble Theater with Jackie Taylor, you know, these folks are founders of the company. They're also starring in the shows. They're also directing. Their plays are going up. You know, there was a lot of stake in there. But even in theaters that had not been founded by those folks, like ETA, worked with Angela Jackson, who was a playwright for them, but she also sat on their auxiliary board of directors. And so that is something too that I'm wondering, is that happening? Are we giving our Black artists who are working for this company and doing labor for this company, are we also giving them a seat at the table in the decision making, right? Because in a nonprofit organization, the board of directors that's the end all be all. And so how many of the board of directors of current theaters in Chicago are made up of the creatives that they're working with, specifically the creatives of color? And then thinking a lot about the creation in community, you know, Obasi, which is perhaps more known for its intersections with literature, but did also have intersections with theater, was a writer's workshop, right? Was a space for Black creatives in the 60s and 70s to workshop things together, to write together, to read things out loud, to get feedback. Are those same institutions able to exist today, able to thrive today? And I hope so. I hope that they are. Okay, so where am I going with all this, with what I found? I think that one thing I learned is that it is awesome to have a big idea of what you want to do and maybe even like what you're going to find, but analysis can only come after knowledge, right? And so when I return to the archives, one thing that I want to do is like the super boring work of going through and just trying to recreate and document the seasons. Okay, we've got season 1, from all of these papers that are all over here, what was in season 1 at Coomba in 1965, right? What was in season 2? What was in season 3? And like I said, that's going to take some work because some of these companies are still in existence today. But that documentation actually feels really important to then be able to zoom out and say, oh, so-and-so worked here and here 5 years later. Great. Or, oh, they worked with this playwright in 1969 and then again in 1974. Okay, great. So there was a relationship there, right? I think that I would like to continue to use the oral histories because, as I said at the beginning, that thing I learned about Kuumba, about starting and ending every performance with a ritual, that is something that I did not learn from the archives. That's something that I learned from Dr. Soini Madison, who was kind enough and generous enough to give me her time. And that, awakened so many things for me. And then, as I said earlier, I am curious as to those who have done this research before me, what about this periodization of the Black arts movement? And I think that it makes sense in New York, right? Because of Baraka and because of the Black Arts Theater. That periodization makes sense to me, and I'm curious, what is the Chicago analog for that, right? And is it something that we can maybe bend and push and extend a little longer? And then I'm wrestling with this idea of new play development, which is, of course, what I wanted to study, and is that possible to do when scripts are not in the public domain and will not be for quite a long time? Can I do that kind of genetic criticism where I'm looking at the journey of a play over multiple drafts before those plays are able to be scanned? I have curiosities about that. And then I'm curious about what new play development looks like if the forms are more experimental, right? If we're not doing an Aristotelian structure, how do we conceive of development? And I want to lift up Chicago's resources again, because that's why I was able to have all of these big thoughts and have to change and have to adapt and things, is because that's where the resources led me to. And so I'm excited to come back and engage with them again. And, unfortunately, a lot of our forerunners of the Black Arts movement have passed or are getting up there. I've been trying to meet with Val Gray Ward, for instance, of Coomba for about 3 months, and her health has been in varying states. And so it is important to me to return to get that knowledge from those folks while I am still able, not for my scholarship or because of me, but because I believe that they have lessons that benefit Black history, that benefit Chicago, and that benefit theater artists around the country. Okay, and I will end as we began with lots of gratitude. Thank you all so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Paul Michael. We quite enjoyed that. So we do have some time for Q&A and discussion. And for this section, we have invited as our facilitator and discussant, Dr. Tabiti Lewis, who is, I will say first, a 2019 BMRC Fellow. And we are happy to have him join us today. He hails from St. Louis, Missouri, where he grew up in West and North St. Louis. He's a graduate of University of Rochester and received degrees in both English and history there with honors. and then a master's in arts and of teaching from the University of Rochester School of Education, before going on to receive his doctorate in English from St. Louis University, with a special focus on American literature and culture between the 50s and the 90s. And Black feminist writer Toni Cade Bambara, a special focus. While completing his doctorate, he earned a fellowship at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. At Washington State University, Vancouver, where he is now, Dr. Lewis is Associate Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs and also Professor of English. He teaches contemporary American literature, specializing in multicultural literature and Black American literature. He also teaches creative nonfiction and humanities courses with a popular culture emphasis. So he joined WSU faculty in 2007 and has published widely in the areas of American literature, masculinity, African American studies, and popular culture, specifically music and sports. So Dr. Lewis, when you are ready to open the Q&A, we are ready to chat. Oh, and audience members, you may put your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I will be looking out as well.
Okay.
If Paul, you do raise your hand, don't forget to unmute yourself.
Okay. Paul Michael, thank you for that presentation. I think the topic that you've chosen is extremely rich, and you are correct that there is so much that needs to happen regarding examining these ensemble companies. I also wanted to just sort of commend you for just your openness and sort of talking about the growth and just the shift in the topic to the Black ensemble is a necessity, and how through your explorations of the archives it sort of had an impact on your project. And so I think I was asked just to make a couple of comments and then sort of take some questions. And so I like that you hit on something that was extremely important, a number of things that were extremely important, but one of them being that Chicago.
Oh, I think Dr. Lewis froze for a minute. Hang on. He may not realize it. I'm going to type a message really quickly. And hopefully
Chicago represents an example.
Uh-oh. Okay, he does.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
We can. We may have missed a few of your comments just in the last a couple minutes. And
okay.
Yeah.
Like that.
Sorry.
I like that Paul Michael leaned.
Okay. Let me request that maybe he
into the experimental.
Yeah, maybe he could turn off his video. Why don't you suggest that, Allison?
Yes, I was going to say maybe that will help.
Is that better?
It is.
Oh, okay. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. That the experimental ideas in the Chicago theater are absolutely steeped in this Black arts moment, right? And you see this in the music. You see this in the poets who are all challenging form, right? And how the text falls on the page and this emphasis on sound, and the fact that Black studies itself is interdisciplinary. And so absolutely the dramatists would bring in poetry and music and visuals, the wall of respect has not just the paintings, but also, you know, lines from poems as well as photographs, right? And, you know, the early Obasi program at Lincoln Center enveloped, you know, music, drama, poets, you know, the whole political voices, right, and statements. And so you're also correct to point out something that really challenges
Okay. I think we are having just a bit of a problem, unfortunately, and I am not sure.
A very serious misnomer regarding the Black arts. Okay, I'm gonna just make another comment, and then I guess we should go to the Q&A, because technology does not want to allow me to go too far. So I was going to ask you this question, and you seem to have shifted to it, which is you mentioned Theater Alliance of Chicago, and I think that's a place to lean into. If you're going to have a comparative, it needs to be within the Black Theater Alliance of Chicago and those different theater companies, and then examine how are they
To BT, we missed the last of what you said. Lean into the Theater Alliance of Chicago, and then if you could pick up there, if you can hear me, and if you're able to get your mic adjusted. Not sure. Okay. Or
yeah, I was going to suggest putting it in the chat.
Yes, maybe to BT, perhaps put that, at least that last comment about the Theater Alliance of Chicago in the chat, so we'll all know what you were saying about that. And then we'll go from there to open the floor for questions.
And it looks like, Allison, that he has left.
So
I will connect with him. Yeah, I can totally connect with him. I love all of these thoughts that he's bringing.
Yeah,
I am so curious. So I will connect with him individually.
Absolutely. So as he has he mentioned he wanted to do that with you. I think he may hop back in, but I do see that, well, as we're, waiting to see, one hand is raised. So Elizabeth, did you have a question? Yes.
I did, and a comment, and I'm afraid that it's not going to be at all as wonderfully insightful and on topic as what we were just hearing. But so I should introduce myself. I'm Elizabeth Long. I'm the Associate University Librarian for IT and Digital Scholarship here at University of Chicago, and I manage the Black Metropolis Research Consortium as one of the things I do. And so I'm going to ask questions or talk from that perspective of being part of a library and archives and thinking. You've given so many wonderful, thoughts and information, but I want to start by saying I just adored your phrase, no longer an article, not yet a dissertation. Like that should be the title of its own article. That is such a point that scholars are so often. It's like I now see where it's growing, but I'm not yet where it's going to be. And that's just the most beautiful way of describing that. But so I was really taken by some of the comments you made, both around the frustration, which I share, with the idea that you were having, trouble getting scans of these things in copyright. And I can't speak for individual archives, and people approach things differently. But part of me just looked at that thinking, copyright there are fair use clauses. There are, things that help researchers. So I would love to think about, and, Allison, we could follow up on this, whether there are any ways we could help. And I think if not, these are what I love about these talks that we have with the fellows is it helps us hear and see where your barriers are and what you're running into. Because if we can't, solve it right now, I would love to think about how I can take that back to the profession, saying we need to be able to facilitate. How can you make a copy of something just for your own purpose with, a promise that you're not then going to be sharing it. I realize one of the challenges is some things have much higher, the concern around them and the desire to lock down is always higher. And, things like plays that could still be produced, et cetera, fall into that category. But I would love to think about how for you, because the alternative is something that right now we're creating barriers for you as well, which is you spend more time here and you take extensive notes, you spend, that's the other side of it, right? And before we had digitization and all of that, what a scholar would have done is sat there and taken extensive notes. But then that's not being helped by the fact that you have small, small number of windows of hours when you could be here, let alone the, coming here to do this. The second thing that I found really, that I would love to think about what that also means was all the things you were finding not in the collections. Because I think we as libraries are also always really interested to learn from scholars, what should we be collecting? And that's not just, we University of Chicago, but really all the member institutions of BMRC, because one thing we're very aware of is also thinking about the fact that, where are the appropriate places for archives to be? And how do we reach out and make sure that, if there's a place over here that's where it should be, how do we make that part of our networking and consortia and make sure we're doing as much as we can to get you all access that you need. So I don't know that was much as a questions as much as I want to encourage you to continue to give this feedback. Allison is really our good, funnel for a lot of this information. But I think I'd just like to express my gratitude for the things you've raised that have been challenges, because for me, I see that as those are things we need to learn from and figure out how do we help make them not challenges for you.
Thank you so much. Elizabeth, I really appreciate that, everything that you're saying. And I want to, again, uplift Allison specifically and the BMRC, which is that every time I did come to an obstacle, I felt very empowered to share that with Allison. And we divided and conquered. We really tried to get those ETA records. Like we put in some hours making calls, and it didn't happen this go around, right? And then with the Val Gray Ward papers, for instance, at the Woodson, they're not processed. And right. It's such a big collection. And I was like, I'll go in unprocessed. Like, I don't need processed, right. But it was one of those things where they're trying to establish, they've got a lot of new folks in charge there. They're trying to establish their archival practices, and good for them. And I'll be back. That's the thing. It's like, I said to Raquel, I was like, okay, you're doing it in 3 years. Like, I'll be back in 3 years, because it is so important to this research that I'm trying to do. I think that in terms of this question of, what are the things that libraries and archives should be collecting? One of the, it's like the things that are our weaknesses also make our biggest strengths sometimes, right? So I always kind of have the imposter syndrome of like, well, like I'm getting a PhD, but really I'm just a theater kid and like la, la, la. But I think that actually helps me ask these questions of like going in and being like, okay, I'm getting theater records. Surely there will be rehearsal reports. Like, surely there will be rehearsal reports to tell me what happened in rehearsal and what the play development structure was. And instead, it's a lot of financial records. It's a lot of programs and photos, which are all amazing and like did help me learn things. But then I had to talk to you know, Soini Madison or Angela Jackson to say, okay, but like, what were you doing? Like, how did it start? You know, Soini shared with me that for one show that they did, they started and ended every performance by reciting a Paul Laurence Dunbar poem together. That is so rich. That has to be documented because there is a cultural work that is doing, and there is a there's kind of like almost like a spiritual practice in that as well, a ritualistic practice, I guess you could say, that I think is so beautiful and speaks to their own conception of what Kuumba was doing, not only for creativity and drama, but also for Black liberation. And I was so grateful for those tidbits that I was able to find through those interviews.
Yeah. And I think you'll find some more rich pieces of information when you aren't able to schedule your oral histories with Val Gray Ward and others that you may have plans to line up. I would suggest, I know that they're still early on in their work, but the Chicago Black Dance Legacy Project is now working with the Newberry. And I do know that part of what they plan to do is to collect oral histories. That's more of dance groups, but there is in some cases maybe some overlap. But anyway, there is in our chat, because Dr. Lewis had a little problem with the technology. Listen, he says, your presentation points to a longer period of the Black arts movement because of the production and existence of institutions beyond the 1970s and into the 80s, et cetera. The theater companies point to a longer time for the Black arts movement. I would love to see your comparative analysis focus on the Theater Alliance of Chicago members like Black Ensemble Kuumba and ETA as representative of Black creativity and Black creative praxis that you mentioned. And then also he says, Usini Perkins papers is very important as the Theater Alliance of Chicago materials are there. Yeah, so wonderful. And we were really, I did send a note to Professor Lewis that this happens to all of us at some point with technology. It just does, and it is frustrating. But we were able to hear a lot of your comments, Professor Lewis, so no worries. And I know that you and Paul Michael have plans to connect. So thank you for your contribution and your comments. And we were relying on, when we invited you, we were relying on your in-depth knowledge, and we got that even with the technology problems we had today. So thank you. You helped to enrich the talk as well. And Paul Michael, you are doing wonderful work. And we are so happy to know that the dive you made, the deep dive this summer, has put you on a path, answered some questions for you. And we look forward to hearing more about your work. I know you're in the early stages of your not just dissertation. Not yet dissertation.
Not yet a dissertation.
Yeah, not yet a dissertation.
And you and probably some of our other fellows also have helped raise issues that we're talking about as a consortium about how we can help with thinking about informing priorities for getting things processed, et cetera, based on what people are doing. So again, really appreciate that you've been raising those issues and your patience and recognition that, you'll need to come back, that there's time, but I think we want to see what we can do to help better facilitate when people are coming, because we realize that this is, as you say, everyone has their own way of there are different policies, each of our institutions, but Absolutely. We're very interested in helping figure out how we can help, facilitate. My sister studied Weimar Republic theater when she was doing her dissertation. And she literally started right before the Berlin Wall came down, and the barriers were incredible for how she could get access to the archives she needed. And then the wall came down, and as a result, it wasn't just like not having the like crossing checkpoint Charlie. Everyone was like, freedom, openness, come into our archives. And they just let her into all these unprocessed archives. And she said, a year later, everything had gotten like, they now had processes in place. And she just got that amazing period when they were just like, come on in and do whatever you want. And so I wish we could help you with those kinds of, spontaneous things that happen sometimes, but we'll see what we can do.
Yes. Professor Lewis, did you want to try offer us any last comment before we close up? Uh-oh.
He's frozen again.
Oh, he froze again. I thought maybe it was a good moment, but that's okay. Thank you again, Paul Michael. We quite enjoyed your talk, and we do look forward to hearing more from you.
Oh, good. He's put the last comment in the chat.
Oh, also, yes, good. Think about the impact of Harold Washington's mayorship on the Black arts movement. Yeah,
creating access to funding. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
That's
the political context does so much with what support or non-support is there.
Wonderful. All right.
Thank you so much.